Vegas has seen scandals before, but nothing like this. The Vanguard Art Gala was supposed to be the social event of the year. Billionaires, celebrities, collectors, and the most powerful names in Las Vegas all gathered under one roof. But nobody expected the woman everyone thought was broken to suddenly appear like a queen reclaiming her throne. Elara Vance, the brilliant art curator, married to hotel mogul Julian Croft, vanished months ago after whispers of betrayal spread across elite circles. Tonight, she returns dressed like vengeance itself, and insiders say she is carrying secrets capable of destroying one of the most influential empires in the American West. This isn't just high society drama, this is war in designer heels.
Hey there! If you believe real strength is forged in the fires of betrayal, hit that like and subscribe button. Let's dive in. The lights of Boston's skyline shimmered on the dark surface of the harbor, but they had nothing on the woman gliding through the lobby of the city's brand new art gallery. Charlotte Vance carried herself like a gathering storm, her couture gown a masterpiece of sharp angles and black satin. Every step was deliberate, a silent countdown to the beautiful destruction she was about to unleash. She had curated this entire evening, every last detail planned with an artist's precision. Because tonight, at the grand opening of the Zenith Gallery, her husband Julian Thorne had absolutely no idea she was about to arrive. He thought Charlotte was the fragile, pregnant woman he'd left behind in their Beacon Hill townhome, the brilliant wife, completely devastated by his recent coldness. But that woman no longer existed. Her heartbreak had been sculpted into a masterpiece of revenge. And tonight, Charlotte wasn't the victim, she was curator of his complete and utter ruin. The scandal she was about to unveil would make Boston's high society gasp. Because when a woman curates her own justice, the world pays attention. And Charlotte was here to collect on every lie with an interest rate only a shattered heart can charge. Chapter 1. The Unveiling. The Boston harbor glowed against the New England night, a ribbon of city lights and old money. From the top floor of her new masterpiece, Charlotte Vance stared out at the city she'd helped to redefine. From her private office, the other high-rises looked like jewels scattered on black velvet. Every light told a story of fortunes made in finance and biotech. Charlotte had arrived 6 years ago as Charlotte Hayes, a bold young curator from New York with a vision that intimidated even the most established gallery owners. Her genius for creating exhibits that felt alive caught the eye of Julian Thorne, the most powerful tech mogul on the East Coast. Julian didn't just build companies, he built futures, with a tech empire that spanned from Miami to Montreal. Their love affair unfolded between art installations and charity galas. Charlotte remembered their first meeting at a modern art symposium, where her audacious exhibition proposal had left the room buzzing. He came up to her afterwards, his bespoke suit fitting him like a second skin. His ambition was a gravitational pull, and when he smiled, Charlotte felt the rest of the world just melt away. The curator who wants to build a gallery that actually challenges art itself? He'd asked, his voice a deep, assured hum. I had to meet the woman with the nerve to put the status quo on notice. Their wedding was the social event of the year. The Boston Museum of Fine Arts closed its doors to the public for their ceremony, with 1,000 guests flown in from across the globe. Charlotte was a vision as she came down the aisle, her gown a cascade of avant-garde lace. The museum's main hall was transformed into a forest of white calla lilies and modern sculptures, with a string quartet playing softly. Julian waited for her, his eyes glistening, whispering, "My beautiful curator," as she met him at the altar. A Massachusetts state senator married them under a breathtaking Dale Chihuly glass installation. As they kissed, a silent explosion of fireworks lit up the sky over the Charles River, a stunning tribute to their new life together. The first 3 years were a perfectly curated, sun-drenched dream. Charlotte launched her own consultancy, Vance Curations, with an office overlooking the financial district. She specialized in curating landmark exhibitions that redefined corporate spaces. Her vision blended classical forms with disruptive, cutting-edge artists, injecting a new creative energy into Boston. The townhome they shared was their first real collaboration. Charlotte had designed it as a sanctuary sale of polished concrete and glass. Massive windows framed the Boston skyline like a living mural, and every piece of furniture was a modern classic she had sourced herself. Julian was the picture-perfect husband in those early years. He would surprise her with rare art theory manuscripts he'd hunted down on business trips. He organized romantic escapes to Paris and Milan, and he celebrated every award she won as if it were his own. They even started a joint philanthropy, the Thorne Vance Foundation, which provided grants for emerging artists in New England. "You're my center, Lottie," he'd tell her as they sat on their roof deck, watching the city lights flicker on. "Before you, I just wrote code. With you, we're building a dynasty." Charlotte believed every single word. She had poured her soul into his legacy. Her visionary exhibitions had turned 3 of Julian's soulless office buildings into cultural landmarks. His flagship tech campus featured her art walks, which offered incredible immersive experiences, while another property had a public sculpture garden that transformed the downtown area. Each project was a testament to her talent and her love for him. But betrayal often hides in the details, disguised as ambition. The signs started as hairline cracks. Julian began working late, blaming server negotiations with Seoul. Their intimate dinners were replaced by urgent calls from his development team. Weekend getaways were suddenly canceled due to server farm blackouts and hostile takeover bids. Charlotte, absorbed in her most demanding project, yet the career-defining Zenith Gallery, didn't notice the cracks in the facade at first. She trusted Julian implicitly, believing their marriage was built on solid ground. It was 6 months ago, while planning a surprise anniversary getaway for him, that Charlotte discovered her perfect life was just a beautiful, empty exhibit. The trip was a secret, a week in a secluded villa in Tuscany. Charlotte was on their shared tablet, looking for booking confirmations, when she saw a receipt she didn't recognize from a boutique jeweler. A small recurring monthly charge. Confused, she looked up the jeweler. They specialized in discreet custom pieces for wealthy clients. Her blood turned to ice. She picked up her phone and hired an investigator herself, telling him to look into her husband. 2 weeks later, she got an email. The subject line was neat, professional and chilling. It simply said, "Your report." Charlotte felt the oxygen leave the room as she clicked the file open. There was Julian, but he wasn't alone. A much younger woman with platinum blonde hair was with him, in photos taken all over his penthouse in Miami, a trip he had claimed was a solo tech conference just a month ago. She clearly wasn't a colleague. They were kissing on the balcony, her hand resting on his chest. They were sharing a bottle of champagne by the pool at dusk. The world around Charlotte went completely quiet. The city's hums disappeared. The light from her screen felt cruel and unforgiving. She was scrolling through a gallery of her own personal destruction. The woman, whose name was Maya, whispered something in his ear in one shot, and Julian threw his head back and laughed. A genuine, unguarded laugh that Charlotte believed was only for her. Then, in the final photo, the woman held up her hand, showing off a unique Cartier bracelet. A bracelet Charlotte had seen the designs for. One Julian claimed was a custom gift for his sister. Charlotte snapped the tablet shut. The sharp click echoed in the silent townhome like a gunshot. She didn't cry. She just sat there perfectly still as her entire world fractured. When Julian came home that night, she smiled and told him everything was fine. But her mind was already curating a war. That night, lying beside him in the darkness, she listened to his steady, sleeping breath and began to map out a deconstruction. A curator knows that before you can present something new and brilliant, you must first tear down the rotten, compromised exhibit. The affair was a fact. But what would Charlotte do about it? A. Expose him in public. For 3 agonizing months, I lived a double life. To the world, I was Charlotte, the art world prodigy, the happy, pregnant wife and business partner. On the inside, I was just a woman quietly documenting the demolition of her own life. Our mornings became a carefully rehearsed play. Julian would wake before dawn, tracking Asian stock markets while I reviewed acquisition reports for the gallery. We'd kiss goodbye, and his lips always tasted like a lie. But I was done with guessing. I now had facts. It wasn't about his phone or a new cologne he was suddenly wearing. It was the gaping holes in his stories. The board meeting in Chicago, when his credit card statement showed a suite at the Mandarin Oriental in Miami. I gathered these facts like an appraiser checking a painting for forgery. Her name was Maya, and I confirmed it in the most chilling way. I hired a private detective after finding a receipt for a $20,000 necklace I never got. The investigator, a quiet man named Marcus, met me in a minimalist coffee shop downtown. He looked at me with a kind of professional sympathy I wouldn't truly grasp for another 30 seconds. "Mrs. Vance," he began, his voice low. "Mr. Thorne is careful." I forced a tight, brittle smile. "I'm aware. That's why you're here. What have you got?" The man sighed. "Charlotte, are you sure you want to do this now?" But my hand was already reaching for the manila envelope, steady as I pulled it across the cold marble table, a table I'd specifically chosen for its perfect view of my new gallery. Julian was there, in full glossy color, but he wasn't alone, and he sure as hell wasn't discussing server uptime. Maya, I knew her name from the file. She was laughing, her head tilted back, while Julian gazed at her with a look of raw adoration I thought he saved only for me. My world didn't end. It sharpened into painful, hideous focus. My phone vibrated in my purse, a calendar reminder. Anniversary dinner, 8 p.m. The sound made them both smile in the photograph, frozen in their moment of deceit. Julian. The name was a whisper, a curse. "It's a business charge." That's what he said, but I knew that tone. It's the one men use, for it's not what it looks like. A lie, wrapped in a casual shrug. And I knew because I'd already found the proof. Sienna was 26, a fact I learned after digging into her life. A star interior designer who had conquered Boston, landing a massive contract with my husband's SS real estate company 6 months ago. She was gorgeous, naturally, with the easy charm of someone who always gets what she wants. She had eyes that cut right through you and a smile that could close any deal. "Sienna, I think you should probably go," Grant muttered, his voice strained as he fiddled with his tie. "We'll connect later." She gathered her portfolio with a slow, calm elegance, not the least bit fazed. As she walked by me, she stopped, her eyes locking with mine. There was no shame, no apology, just a flash of pity. "Ava," she said, her voice like smooth silk, "I really am sorry you had to find out like this." And with that, she was gone, leaving the faint scent of her expensive perfume and the chilling certainty that she now held my husband's future in her hands. Grant stepped toward me, his hands up as if I were a frightened animal. "Ava, honey, we need to talk. This is nothing serious. It was just what, Grant?" My voice was strangely calm, as if it belonged to someone else. "A little fun? A fling? A distraction from your boring wife?" He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. And in that moment, I watched him decide that his next words would be yet another calculated lie. "It's complicated. The pressure from the new tower has been insane. You're always so focused on the gallery." And there it was, the betrayal, followed by the twisting knife of blame. Somehow this was all my fault. Somehow my ambition, my success, and my drive to build something beautiful had made me the villain in my own life. I bent to get my handbag, carefully stepping around the shattered pieces of my marriage. When I looked up at Grant, my eyes felt like ice. I wasn't the woman who cried herself to sleep over his moods anymore. I was someone new, someone he had just made. "When you come home tonight," I said, my voice perfectly empty, "my things will be gone. Ava, wait, we can work this out. I'll end it with her. We can try counseling. We can—" But I was already walking out, leaving him standing there with his hollow promises and the lingering smell of his mistress. That night, I didn't return to our penthouse. I booked a suite at the Liberty, a hotel whose art I had helped curate back when I still believed in happy endings. I began making calls, first to my lawyer, then my accountant, and finally my sister in Chicago, who swore in Polish for 10 straight minutes after I told her everything that happened. The next few days proved the affair was just the beginning of a much bigger disaster. My lawyer, Marcus Finnegan, a sharp, no-nonsense man who handled Boston's nastiest divorces, called me to his office. What he spread out on the table in front of me made it difficult to breathe. "Ava," Marcus began, pointing to a stack of financial papers, "we have a very big problem." For years, I'd made separate gallery and joint accounts with Grant for our home and investments. Or at least, that's what I believed. Grant's been funneling money from your joint accounts into a network of shells companies, Marcus explained. "You didn't approve any of these transfers, did you?" I just shook my head, a wave of sickness rolling over me. Based on these statements, over the last 18 months, he has siphoned off more than $3 million, and it gets much worse. Marcus slid a thick folder across the polished desk. Inside were loan applications I had never seen, investment papers with my forged signature, and property deeds I never knew we had. It appears your husband was using your perfect credit and the gallery's reputation to secure high-risk loans in. And Ava, a lot of these ventures failed. The room started to spin. I gripped the arms of the chair as Marcus detailed the full scale of Grant's financial betrayal. "How much?" I whispered. "How much am I on the hook for? If these signatures are proven valid, you are personally liable for nearly $8 million in debt you knew nothing about." $8 million. My personal savings were less than $500,000. My gallery, my share in a few paintings, may be worth $2 million if I liquidated everything. Grant hadn't just broken my heart. He had systematically taken apart my entire financial life. And he had used my name, my good reputation, and my signature to do it. "What are my choices?" I asked, the words feeling like gravel in my throat. "We can fight it. We'll claim fraud, forgery, and throw everything we have at him." Marcus took off his glasses, his professional poker face softening for a moment. "But Ava, Grant has the most ruthless lawyers in the state. He practically owns this city. He has the money to drag this out for years." That night, alone in my hotel suite, I poured a glass of Cabernet and stared at the sparkling Boston skyline. The city I'd built my world in, the city I loved, now seemed to be laughing at me. My phone buzzed. It was Grant. He'd been calling and texting relentlessly. "This time," I answered. "Ava, darling, thank God. We have to talk. Please, just come home." "I don't have a home anymore, Grant," I replied, my voice completely flat. "You leveraged it away without my knowledge." There was a pause. Then Grant's tone changed, becoming colder, sharper. "Ava, I know you're upset, but let's not make this messier than it needs to be. We can sort this out like adults." "Sort what out? The affair? The stolen money? The forged papers?" "Listen," Grant snapped, his voice now the weapon he used in boardrooms to destroy his rivals. "You have two choices. We divorce quietly, you take what's yours, and we both walk away. Or you can fight me, and I swear to you, Ava, you will leave with nothing. That is not a threat. It's a fact, Ava. You don't get how this city works. You don't have my kind of money, my influences, or my connections. If you fight me, I will ruin you. When I'm done, you will never curate another exhibit in Boston again. Your name will be poison. You won't be able to hang a painting in a coffee shop." I squeezed my eyes shut. I could hear the muffled sounds of a party from a nearby ballroom, the happy music a cruel joke playing over the ruins of my life. "Oh, and one more thing," Grant added. "Sienna's pregnant." The words hit me like a punch to the stomach. I bent over, the phone slipping from my fingers as the tears I'd refused to shed for weeks finally burst out. Grant's voice kept going, a small, distorted sound from the fallen phone. "We're getting married as soon as the divorce is final. It's for the best. Ava, we've been done for years. We just didn't have the courage to admit it. Sienna makes me feel alive again in a way you just haven't for a very long time." I snatched the phone from the floor, my entire body shaking. "Ava, are you there?" "Yes," she whispered, her voice shattered. "Good, let's be adults." I wiped my eyes, stood up straight, and stared at the reflection of the Boston skyline in the window. "Grant," she said, her voice suddenly like steel, "go to hell," and she hung up. "If you want to see Ava rise from the ashes of this betrayal, make sure you subscribe to our channel. Her fight for justice begins now." Chapter 4. A Spark in the Dark. The next 2 months were the darkest of Ava's 34 years. She found a small studio in Allston, a place that cost less than their old monthly wine bill, but it was all she could afford with her assets frozen by the court. The apartment was a single room, a kitchen the size of a closet, and a view of a loud street corner. No skyline views, no doorman, no custom Italian furniture, but it had one thing the penthouse never did. It was hers. Mornings started with bad coffee and sorting through legal papers from her lawyer, Marcus. Her afternoons were a dizzying loop of calls, with artists canceling shows, gallery partners ignoring her, and creditors hounding her for payments she couldn't make. At night, the city's neon signs and constant sirens bled through her thin blinds. Ava hadn't just lost a husband, she'd lost her whole career. Rumors of her financial collapse spread like a plague through Boston's elite circles, and in a city built on reputation, a bad rumor is a professional death sentence. The modern art exhibition she was curating for the museum, her dream project, was indefinitely postponed after the key investors pulled out. Piece by piece, 5 years of nonstop hard work was being totally erased. But the nights were always the worst. Alone in the dark apartment, with only the hum of the old window AC for company, Ava was ambushed by memories she spent all day pushing away. The image of the necklace on Sienna's Instagram played on a torturous loop in her mind, each detail getting sharper. The way Grant had lied so easily about the charge, the way Sienna had tagged the picture from a resort in Nantucket, a trip Grant said was a solo work retreat. They had become a real couple, not just some dirty secret. How long had this been their life? Months? A year? They were likely laughing at her while she was busy planning their future. They'd laughed at her loyalty while she planned their future, and they planned their affair. The questions were like poison eating away at her confidence. Ava stared at her own exhausted face in the bathroom mirror, trying to find what Grant saw in Sienna that he'd lost in her. Was it her age? Ava was 34, Sienna was just 26. Was it because Ava was a partner, a woman with her own ambition? Sienna was a fresh start, a clean slate. Or maybe, the most brutal thought of all, Grant was right. Maybe Ava became so focused on their empire she forgot how to be the wife he wanted. Was this somehow her fault? That's the kind of late-night thought that shatters you. The little voice that insists you are to blame for your own pain. Ava had started drinking, not heavily, but methodically, like medicine. 1 glass of wine became 2, then the whole bottle just to look at the divorce papers that felt like a foreign language. She stopped wearing her makeup. her designer clothes, the power suits she'd built her career in. Now she lived in sweatpants, looking less like the real estate powerhouse she was and more like a ghost. Her sister Chloe called every night from Atlanta, her voice a mix of fury at Grant and deep worry for Ava. "Please, just come home," Chloe begged. "We can figure this out. You can start again here." But returning home would be admitting he had won. Ava came to Miami with a hunger to build something. Going back meant explaining how the woman who helped build the skyline was now returning home completely broken. Ava stopped. If you know what it feels like to have your world just completely shatter, let me know in the comments. We can get through this together. Her wake-up call came at rock bottom. Not in person, but with the cold, digital cruelty of an email. She was scrolling through junk mail when she saw it, a baby registry confirmation. Her fingers trembled as she clicked. There it was, a public wish list for Grant and Sna's baby boy. The due date, the expensive crib, the designer clothes. And Grant, smiling in the profile picture with his hand on Sienna's pregnant belly. Ava's breath hitched, her screen blurring with tears. She scrolled down past the endless list of gifts, her heart pounding in her chest. She saw a section for messages from friends and family. A name made her go cold. Leo and Nina. They'd purchased the most expensive stroller on the list. Leo and Nina, Grant's best man and her maid of honor, the couple who spent every holiday at their penthouse, the people Ava considered family. But here they were, celebrating Grant's new life as if Ava never existed. She clicked on Nina's public message. "I am so excited to be the godmother," it read. Godmother. The word slammed into Ava like a physical blow. Nina, who had cried at her wedding, was going to be godmother to the child of her husband's mistress. "We couldn't be happier," Grant had commented below. "It's incredible how things work out. I never thought I could be this happy again. Again." As if their marriage was a prison he'd finally broken out of. "Poor Ava," someone else wrote. "I hope she's doing okay." "Let's not talk about the past," Grant replied. "This baby is our future." Ava dropped her phone, the screen shattering on the tile floor. She slid down the wall, silent tears tracking through the dust on her cheeks. She thought the affair was rock bottom. She thought losing the business was the worst part. But this was a new kind of hell. This was realizing she wasn't just left behind, she was being publicly erased, like their entire decade together was nothing but a bad memory. She eventually pushed herself up, picked up her broken phone, and stared at her reflection in the dark screen. That night, with a bottle of cheap grocery store wine, Ava knew it was time to make a call. She dialed her sister. "Chloe," she said, her voice shaking. "Ava, honey, what's wrong?" "I saw it. The registry, the baby." A heavy silence hung between them. Chloe knew. So, how are you? Ava considered the question. Broken? Yes. Humiliated? Absolutely. But beneath the layers of pain, a tiny spark had just ignited. "Angry," she said at last. "I am so unbelievably angry." "Good," Chloe said, her voice like steel. "It's about damn time. Chloe, I need you. Here. In Miami. When? Now. Get on the first flight you can. Why? What are we doing?" Ava walked to the window, looking at the glittering towers on the skyline they had built together. "We are going to burn his entire world to the ground," Ava said, a cold purpose flooding her veins. "We're taking back every single thing he stole from me, and he will never, ever forget my name." Chloe let out a sharp, fierce laugh. Their grandmother had fought off developers to save the family farm. Their mom had built an empire from a single storefront. The women in their family didn't just survive. They fought back. "Now that sounds like my sister," Chloe said. "What's the plan?" A slow, dangerous smile spread across Ava's face for the first time in forever. "Bring your laptop, your burner phones, and get ready for a war." 3 days later, Chloe arrived, looking every bit the general Ava needed. She had one suitcase, a briefcase with $20,000 in cash, and a strategy she'd drafted on the plane. "Okay, first things first," Chloe said, setting up her laptop on the small kitchen table. "We need intelligence, everything. On Grant, on Sienna, on his shell corporations, the real books, not the ones he shows investors." "And how are we going to do that?" Chloe's grin was sharp, mirroring Ava's new resolve. "I know a guy, a forensic accountant. He's a digital ghost who specializes in complex fraud and hiding assets. And he owes me a very, very big favor." Less than a week later, an encrypted drive arrived. It contained hundreds of files. It was all there: hidden bank accounts, property deeds in other countries, proof the affair started years ago. And then they found it, the real weapon. Solid evidence that Grant had been forging Ava's digital signature on loan applications for the last 2 years. "Ava," Chloe whispered, staring at the screen. "This is enough to put him in federal prison for a decade." "I don't want him in prison," Ava said, a strange light in her eyes. "I want something so much better. I want poetic justice." If you think Ava is about to take back control, hit that like button, because this story of revenge is only getting started. 2 weeks later, Ava walked into her lawyer's office, transformed. Her hair was sharp, her makeup was flawless, and she wore a suit that was pure power. "Robert," she said, placing the encrypted drive on his desk, "I'm withdrawing the divorce papers." Robert Chen stared, completely stunned. "Ava, what are you talking about? This drive will destroy him in court. We can get every dime back, and then some." "Exactly," Ava replied with a cold smile. "But this isn't going to happen in court. We're going to do this my way." The new Ava Vance had arrived. 6 months after her world collapsed, she was ready to re-enter Miami society. But this time, she wouldn't be a victim. The first step was a new command center. Chloe called in a favor and secured a stunning loft in the Wynwood Arts District. It wasn't the cold penthouse she'd had with Grant. This was a war room, the perfect stage for a comeback where the victim becomes the victor. The loft was a converted warehouse with soaring ceilings and massive industrial windows. Ava made the open space her home, her office, and her base of operations. Chloe filled it with sleek furniture that whispered of quiet, deadly power. But the apartment wasn't the only upgrade. Ava built a team: a trainer, a nutritionist, a new stylist. The point wasn't just to look good. This was about building an armor of absolute confidence, the kind you can only get by walking through hell and coming out the other side. Her hair was now cut in a sharp angled bob that highlighted her cheekbones. Her new clothes were simple, elegant, and projected a success that needed no introduction. But the most important change was inside. Ava spent months studying Grant Archer's entire empire. She learned every partner, every investor, every politician in his pocket. She went deep into his financials, his weak points, and his dirtiest secrets. Like a general planning a campaign, she mapped out his entire world. And in doing so, she found the one hairline crack that could bring it all down. It turns out Marcus wasn't the real estate mogul everyone thought. His whole empire was a house of cards, built on a mountain of secret debt and shady loans between shell companies. It only looked good because he kept expanding. I discovered his entire operation depended on landing one single contract to survive. That contract was for a new $2 billion island development the city was accepting bids for. It was the biggest project in Florida, and Marcus had to win it, and I had the perfect blueprint to take it all away. For 5 years, I'd secretly poured my soul into Project Oasis, a revolutionary private island concept that blended extreme luxury with total sustainability. A design that would redefine the entire Miami coastline. I'd kept it from Marcus, saving the finished plans as a special surprise. The irony was crushing. The very project meant to secure our future was now the perfect weapon to ruin him. In just 2 months, I refined my pitch, called in favors, and built a brand new firm from the ground up. My old life was completely gone. In its place stood Azure Legacy Properties, with my old mentor Elena as a partner and a team of hungry youngsters. That name was a promise. I was rising from the ashes, and I was ready to build my own empire. My comeback was planned for the annual Miami Real Estate Vanguard Gala at the Faena Hotel, the exact place my world fell apart just 6 months ago. It was the perfect stage, full of every major developer in the state, to announce I was back. I arrived at 8 o'clock, sharp, fashionably late, enough to make a splash without looking needy. I wore a stunning empring gown I designed myself that glittered like the ocean under the ballroom lights. The effect was instant. A hush fell over the room as I moved through the crowd, greeting old contacts as if I'd just returned from a long vacation. Everyone who knew me as Marcus Thorne's quiet, pretty wife saw it instantly. This wasn't some heartbroken woman. This was someone who'd found a strength no man could ever give her. I had found myself again. "Chloe Sterling," said Javier Garcia, the head of the city's zoning board, doing a double take as I joined his group. "I'm stunned to see you. I heard you'd moved back to California. Leave Miami?" My smile was like a perfectly cut diamond. "Xavier, darling, this is my city. I wouldn't dream of it, not when things are finally getting interesting." I never even said Marcus's name, but his betrayal hung in the humid air. At 8:45, right on cue, Marcus arrived with Sophia. Of course. 7 months pregnant, she was clinging to his arm like a prize he'd just won. I watched them from across the grand ballroom. For a single heartbeat, I felt that old, familiar ache. Then, I took a deep breath, straightened my shoulders, and felt an ice-cold purpose rush through me. It was time. Marcus finally saw me about 10 minutes later. I was the center of attention, charming investors and laughing with Damien Croft, the city's toughest architectural critic. When I saw that Marcus had finally locked eyes with me, I held his gaze across the room and gave him a slow, calm smile, the kind you give a competitor, not a shattered ex-wife. It was a smile that said we were equals, from a professional who had totally moved on. Marcus froze, his champagne glass hovering midair. I could see the raw shock on his face, the total confusion, and then the first flicker of real fear. This wasn't the broken woman he left. This was someone new. I excused myself from my group and started walking toward the terrace, my path taking me deliberately close to Marcus and Sophia. Just a few feet away, I paused, pretending I'd only just then noticed them. "Marcus," I said, my voice impossibly warm. "Sophia, how wonderful to see you." Sophia actually flinched, her hand flying to her pregnant belly. Marcus opened his mouth, then closed it, scrambling for words. "Chloe, I wasn't expecting you." "Why not?" I tilted my head, my expression one of pure, innocent surprise. This gala has always been essential for my work. Speaking of which, Sophia, congratulations on the baby. You look absolutely radiant. It was a perfect move. Congratulating her with such poise killed all the drama and cemented my position as the confident woman who'd already won. Sophia could only manage a weak, awkward, "Thank you." "Well," I said with a breezy tone, "I won't keep you to." "Marcus, I hope you're well. I hope you're both incredibly happy." And with that, I swept past them, leaving behind the faint, expensive scent of my perfume and the feeling that the entire world had just shifted. I didn't speak to them again all night, but I could feel Marcus's eyes on me everywhere I went. I had him scared. I had him confused. And that was exactly what I wanted. Chapter 6. The Blueprint. 2 weeks later, I launched the next phase of my plan. The bid for the Biscayne Elysian Isles project was due in 6 weeks. I knew Marcus had been pouring every last cent his company had into his proposal. I also knew, from a very good private investigator, that winning this one contract was the only thing keeping his empire from collapsing. I got a meeting with Isabella Rossi, the matriarch of the family trust that was funding the whole development and the one person whose vote truly mattered. Isabella remembered my early designs and had always respected me, even after the ugly divorce. "Isabella," I said, sitting in her penthouse office over the bay, "I have a proposal that will change the future of Miami." For the next hour, I walked her through my vision for Project Oasis. It wasn't just a row of luxury villas. It was a self-sustaining paradise, mixing incredible architecture with revolutionary green tech, living seawalls to protect the coast, solar panels that looked like sculptures, and a zero-waste system that would set a new global standard. "It's bold," Isabella admitted after I finished my presentation. "Extremely bold. Do you have the money to actually pull this off?" I have something better than money, Isabella. I have passion, and I have a team that believes in this vision. This isn't just business for me. This is my legacy for Miami, the city, that gave me everything and taught me that sometimes you have to burn it all down to build something that lasts. Isabella leaned forward, her eyes lit up with genuine interest. "Chloe, this could redefine coastal living, but building it will cost a fortune." "I've been planning this for 5 years," I replied smoothly. "I have partners from Dubai, tech innovators from Silicon Valley, and exclusive rights to materials that no other developer in Florida can get. I can do this, Isabella, and I can do it in a way that makes this project famous for more than just its price tag." When I left the Rossi Tower that afternoon, I had something I hadn't felt in months. Real hope, not the desperate kind from trying to survive, but the fierce kind from a woman who had finally found her purpose. But the real test came a week later. I was in my new office, finishing the bid documents when my phone buzzed. The name on the screens made me smile. Marcus. I had been waiting for this call. "Hello, Marcus," I answered with the same cool professionalism from the gala. "Chloe, we need to talk." "About what?" A tense silence hung on the line. I could almost hear his jaw tightening. "You know what? I heard you put in a bid for the Elysian Isles." And Chloe, Marcus's voice dropped to that soft, manipulative tone he always used to get his way. "Sweetheart, I know you're upset. I know I messed everything up, but this is just revenge. That project, I've put 2 years of my life into it. My company's entire future is right in this." A cold, beautiful calm washed over me. This was the moment I had been working for. "Are you asking me to withdraw my bid?" I asked, my voice filled with polite curiosity. "I'm asking you to be reasonable. I can make this right. I'll give you other deals. I'll make sure you get other jobs. We could even partner on this one." I laughed, and the sound was sharp and hollow. "Marcus, do you know the real difference between you and me? You build things so you can own them. I build things because they need to exist. And Miami deserves a legacy built on vision, not just on greed." "Chloe, please. Good luck with your proposal, Marcus. May the best vision win." And I hung up. Chapter 7. The Groundbreaking. The Great Hall at the Vizcaya Museum had never seen such a spectacular reversal of fortune. The same woman who 6 months ago had fled the city in total humiliation now stood at the podium like a queen taking back her throne. It was the night of the annual Preservation Society Ball, the biggest event on the Miami social calendar, and Chloe Sterling had arrived not as the rejected wife of Marcus Thorne, but as the celebrated CEO of Azure Legacy Properties. 3 days earlier, the Rossi Trust had officially announced that my firm had won the Elysian Isles contract. The massive data breach not only cost Julian his reputation, but it also exposed the complete rot at the core of his life. The internal investigation that followed uncovered the true extent of his deception. The leaked emails confirming his affair were just the beginning. For years, Julian had been faking user numbers and misleading his investors. Without the constant flow of venture capital, which had now completely vanished, his entire tech empire was about to implode. Federal regulators were swarming Julian Vance's Silicon Valley offices just this morning. He was facing charges of securities fraud, negligence, and insider trading. His stock options were worthless, his personal accounts were frozen, and his boy genius reputation was in tatters. But Elena hadn't come to the tech summit to celebrate her ex-husband's demise. She came to prove that a woman could walk away from a toxic marriage and build something more meaningful and powerful than ever before. Her suit, a sharp custom design, was a statement of elegant, unapologetic power. The material seemed to drink the stage lights, creating a soft, commanding glow as Elena moved. Her hair was cut in a sleek, modern style, revealing a pair of sapphire earrings, a gift from her grandmother that held a deep fire. But her most stunning accessory was the unshakable calm she now possessed. For months, Elena had meticulously rebuilt her world, not just her career, but her very soul. She'd fought her way back, rediscovered her own fierce ambition, and learned to define herself not as Julian's wife, but as Elena Serrano. That voice made her turn. It was David Chen, the Valley's most respected venture capitalist, approaching her with a look of pure admiration. David. Elena offered her hand and he shook it warmly. It's an honor to finally meet you. The honor is mine, Elena. Your keynote on the future of digital art was absolutely brilliant. In 20 years of this business, I've never seen anyone articulate that vision so perfectly. Thank you, Elena said, feeling that old creative fire burning bright inside her. This is more than a theory to me. It's the future of creativity, a future where our technology serves art, not the other way around. For the rest of the night, Elena was the room's center of gravity. Startup founders, tech CEOs, and rival art consultants all wanted a moment of her time. They were desperate to praise her ideas, ask about her new company, and pitch potential collaborations. It was as if the whole industry finally recognized the brilliant mind that had been there all along, hidden in the shadow of her marriage to Julian. Elena, I've been following your work for years, said a legendary gallery owner, approaching her. I always knew you were the real talent. This new consultancy of yours is a game changer. This is only the beginning, Elena promised, a confident smile on her lips, hinting at everything still to come. I'm launching a series of immersive digital galleries over the next 3 years. We're going to prove that technology can have a soul. And that's when she saw them arrive. Julian and Sophia entered the summit like two ghosts from a nightmare, sir. Julian wore his standard black turtleneck, but it seemed to hang off his frame as if the scandal had physically carved a piece out of him. His eyes were hollow, and his famous charismatic smile was a tight, desperate lie. Sophia, now 8 months pregnant, clutched Julian's arm like an anchor. Her maternity dress was expensive, but it couldn't hide the raw anxiety on her face. News of his company's collapse was everywhere, and the pressure was clearly crushing them both. A strange and sudden calm washed over Elena. For months, she had played out this exact moment in her head 1,000 times. But standing here now, she didn't feel the sharp sting of victory she'd expected. There was no pleasure in seeing Julian look so defeated, no triumph in the panic she saw in Sophia's eyes. Instead, she felt a powerful and liberating indifference. Julian had spotted her. Across the crowded hall, their eyes locked, and she saw an entire story in his gaze. Regret, desperation, and a flicker of something she hadn't seen in years. He started walking her way. Elena excused herself from her conversation and moved toward the large windows overlooking the bay. She wasn't running from him, but she wasn't meeting him either. She was simply holding her ground, radiating a quiet and formidable strength. Elena. Julian's voice was rough, as if he hadn't used it in days. Elena turned to face him, her expression the polite, impenetrable mask she had perfected over the last year. Julian, she acknowledged. He simply stood there lost, trying to find the words. The low hum of the summit filled the space between them, and the city's lights sparkling across the water created a beautiful contrast to the tension of the moment. "You look." Julian stopped, cleared his throat, and began again. "You look incredible. Different. More like yourself than I've seen in a decade." Elena tilted her head slightly, regarding him with the cool, detached interest of a historian observing a ruin. "And who am I?" "Julian? Powerful," he admitted, his voice a raw against the noise. "Unstoppable. Like the woman I fell in love with before everything got so complicated." A tiny, humorless smile touched Elena's lips. It was a smile of cold, hard validation. "It's funny," Elena said, her voice quiet, but carrying like a blade. "It took you cheating on me, lying to investors, and becoming an industry pariah for me to finally see who I am when I'm not cleaning up your messes." Julian squeezed his eyes shut as if her words were physical blows. "Elena, I know what I did was unforgivable. I was arrogant. I was a coward. I destroyed the only real thing I ever built." "Yes." Elena agreed, with a chilling sense of peace. "You did. You..." The silence between them felt absolute, as other attendees laughed and networked nearby, oblivious to the quiet demolition taking place. "Is there any way?" Julian started, but Elena held up a hand, stopping him instantly. "No," she said, her voice final. "You don't even know what I was going to ask." Elena smiled, and this time it was real, filled with a pity that was far more devastating than anger. "You were going to ask if there was a chance for forgiveness, a path to starting over, a way to fix the world you shattered." Julian could only nod, his face a canvas of pure despair. "And the answer is no," Elena continued. "Not because I hate you, Julian, and not because I want you to suffer. It's because the woman you betrayed is gone. She died in our apartment the night I read those leaked emails. And the woman I am today deserves so much more than the apologies of a man who only recognizes value when it's walking out the door for good." At that moment, as if on cue, David Chen appeared at her elbow. "Elena," David said, looking right through Julian. "The panel on AI ethics is about to begin. Shall we find our seats?" Elena gave David a genuine, brilliant smile. "I would love that." She took David's offered arm and let him lead her away from Julian without a single look back, moving toward the front row as the lights began to dim. The contrast was almost poetic. Elena was walking with a man who respected her mind, who valued her vision, who saw her as a partner, while Julian was left standing alone watching her go. Over her shoulder, Elena could see Julian, a static figure in the middle of the bustling room, an island of regret in a sea of ambition. Sophia had joined him, her face tight with worry, but he didn't seem to see her at all. His eyes were fixed on Elena, following her with the haunted expression of a man just now realizing the full scale of his loss. "Are you all right?" David asked softly, as they took their seats in the front row. "I am perfect," Elena replied, and was surprised by how deeply true the words felt. "For the first time in a very long time, I am exactly where I'm supposed to be." The moderator on stage tapped the microphone, and a hush fell over the large room, and that when the night completely fell apart. From across the auditorium, Elena heard a sharp, piercing cry. She turned and saw Sophia bent over, one hand clutching her stomach, the other clinging to Julian's sleeve as if she might collapse. A dark stain was spreading on the light gray carpet at her feet. "Help!" Julian screamed, his voice shredding with a raw, animal terror. "Somebody help her! The baby's coming!" The professional summit instantly exploded into chaos. Attendees surged forward, some trying to help, others just staring at the personal disaster. Someone yelled to call an ambulance. The moderator fell silent, leaving a ringing void filled only with panicked shouting and Sophia's agonized cries. Elena sat frozen in her seat, watching the whole catastrophes unfold like a car crash in slow motion. The man who had destroyed her, now terrified, holding on to the woman who had helped him do it. I watched them both face a crisis that exposed their raw, ugly selves, and I felt nothing. No satisfaction in their panic, no urge to intervene, and no need for revenge. Just a deep, profound sense of quiet, the peace of a person who has finally turned the page for good. My colleague Ben looked over at me, his face etched with worry. Should we do something? I watched as conference organizers moved in, as my husband Marcus yelled frantic, useless denials, as Chloe was gently escorted out of the auditorium. I saw the real primal fear in their eyes, the toxic bond they had in that moment of failure, and how they clung to one another as their entire world came crashing down. No, I said at last. They have each other. That's all they're gonna have. Security started moving Chloe out, with Marcus rushing beside them, whispering to her. Just before he went through the doors, Marcus looked back one final time, searching for me. Our eyes met across the chaotic convention hall, and in his gaze I saw a silent question, a last, desperate appeal for something. I gave him a small, intentional nod. It was not forgiveness, it was a conclusion. An acknowledgement that we had once built something important together. An acknowledgement that the partnership was real, even if he was the one who destroyed it. An acknowledgement that it was finally time for both of us to let go and move on. And then he was gone, and I was left standing on the biggest stage in Seattle, in front of the entire biotech industry, with my future laid out before me like a clean slate, waiting for me to write what comes next. Well, Ben said after a long moment, that was dramatic. I laughed, a deep, genuine sound that came from a soul finally released. You know what, Ben? I'm done with all of that drama. I've had my fill for a lifetime. Talk to us about something that actually matters, like our gene editing platform and the future of pediatric medicine. Ben's face relaxed into a relieved smile. Now that sounds like a conversation worth having, and as the moderator tried to regain control of the room, I, Ava Sharma, spoke with a fire in my eyes, outlining my vision to make our lab a new standard for ethical research. I described therapies that would save lives, of a future that would redefine what medical science could achieve, of a company that put patients before profits. I was talking about the future. My future. Epilogue. Clinical trials. So my story didn't peak that day at the conference. It crested 6 months later, as I stood in the clean room of my new research lab, watching my team prepare for the first human trials. The project, once a dream to build with my husband, had now become my fortress, the tangible proof of a woman who learned to build her own success on a foundations of solid science. Any woman who has survived that kind of betrayal knows this to be true. You don't heal from an affair by crawling back to the man who shattered your world. You heal by realizing you are more brilliant, more capable, and more worthy than you ever let yourself believe when you were making yourself smaller to fit his ambitions. A world that never truly deserved your genius. I never spoke to Marcus again. I heard whispers. Of course, Seattle is a small town for the tech elite. He was being investigated for securities fraud, that Chloe had fled back to Europe with their seed money. He lost everything. The firm, the penthouse, the respect. And I felt only a quiet gratitude for him, like I did for all the closed chapters of my life. Gratitude, because his greed had released me from a life that was too small for my spirit. Gratitude, because his deception taught me I could withstand any storm that came my way. And gratitude, because by shattering my heart, he forced me to discover that my real strength was never tied to his approval. For any woman listening, your story doesn't end just because he walks away from it. It begins the moment you decide to write an ending that is all your own. Subscribe to our channel for more stories about women who built empires from ashes, who turned heartache into innovation, and who proved that sometimes losing it all is the only way to finally win the life you were always meant to have. In Seattle, a city that knows how to reinvent itself, Ava Sharma proved the best startup a woman can ever invest in is herself.